In 2011, on the fog-shrouded coast of Port Blossom, Oregon, a specialized unit from the Centers for Disease Control, flanked by federal marshals in full tactical gear, cut the chain on a gate that had been locked for nearly a decade. They were not responding to a natural outbreak. They were serving a warrant on a ghost, acting on a message from a dead man. Their destination was a place the world had once celebrated as a paradise, a utopia of botanical science, the Sterling Botanical Conservancy. But the team that entered the quarantined Elysian Collection, a series of hermetically sealed greenhouses deep within the compound, found no paradise. They found a tomb, not of bodies, but of secrets. The air, even through their filters, felt heavy, thick with the memory of something profoundly wrong. The silence was absolute, broken only by the drip of stagnant condensation and the crunch of dead leaves under their boots. They found labs that looked like altars, dedicated to a terrible science. They found incinerators large enough to erase any mistake. And in a refrigerated, lead-lined vault, they found what they were looking for: the source material for an encrypted data package sent by a whistleblower researcher, a brilliant young man named Dr. Kenji Tanaka, just hours before his car mysteriously plunged off a coastal highway 9 years earlier. That data, once decrypted by government specialists, was not a research paper. It was a ledger, a kill list, written in the language of DNA. It told a story that law enforcement, intelligence agencies, and the public could barely comprehend. For 25 years from this beautiful sanctuary, the Sterling family had operated the most sophisticated and untraceable assassination firm in modern history. Their methods were not bullets or bombs or crude poisons. Their weapons were alive. Orchids engineered to release a pinpoint neurotoxin. Mosses that propagated a flesh-eating fungus so rare it would be misdiagnosed until it was too late. Common field grasses that, when burned as incense or in a fireplace, released a colorless, odorless gas that induced sudden, untraceable cardiac arrest. The ledger suggested more than 200 targeted deaths across the globe. Dissidents, corporate rivals, inconvenient journalists, all victims of what appeared to be tragic natural causes. And it chronicled another, darker number: the 17 Conservancy staff members who, like Dr. Tanaka, asked too many questions, grew too curious, and were silenced. Their disappearances explained away as lab accidents or personal tragedies. Before we continue with the story of the Convent of Eternal Tears, this channel isn't for everyone. Only for the bravest souls who dare to uncover the darkest chapters of American history. If you have the courage to hear what really happened in the shadows of our past, hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments what state you're listening from. Are you brave enough to join our community of true mystery seekers? Let's find out together. And I'm curious, from which state are you listening to this story? Leave a comment below telling us your location. To understand evil, you must first understand the lie, and the lie was beautiful. The Sterling Botanical Conservancy was founded in 1986 by Dr. Alistair Sterling. To the world, he was a visionary, a humanitarian, a charismatic polymath who channeled his family's old money fortune into a noble cause, saving the planet's dying flora, and through it, humanity itself. His face graced the covers of scientific journals and philanthropic magazines. He spoke of a world without famine, of deserts turned green, of nature's power harnessed for the good of all. Port Blossom, Oregon, saw him as a savior, bringing prestige and high-tech jobs to their quiet coastal town. The genius behind the science, however, was his daughter, Dr. Eleanor Sterling. A recluse and a prodigy, she had earned 2 PhDs by the age of 24. While her father charmed the world, Eleanor worked in the labs, her brilliance praised as the engine of the Conservancy's life-saving mission. No one knew that her true work, her real passion, took place in the forbidden Elysian Collection. She was not a savior. She was an artist, and her medium was death. Completing this triumvirate of terror was Julian Thorne. A former special operations soldier with a redacted past, he was the Conservancy's head of security. He was the wall that kept the world out and the secrets in. He was the one who managed the disposals, the one who ensured that employees who stumbled upon the truth like Dr. Tanaka simply ceased to be a problem. Together, this family, The charming patriarch, the genius daughter, and the silent enforcer built an empire on a foundation of lies, watered with the blood of their victims. They created a garden where the most beautiful creations were also the most lethal. So how did they do it? How did they turn a symbol of hope into an assembly line for murder, operating in plain sight for a quarter of a century? The answer lies in the architecture of the facility itself, and in the perverse ideology that drove its creators. In the next part of our investigation, we will peel back the first layer of this verdant lie. We will walk the public grounds of the Sterling Conservancy, and then step across the threshold into the secret world they called the Elysian Collection, the poisonous Eden. The lie was a masterpiece, built not of steel and glass, but of hope and desperation. To understand how the Sterling's poison factory flourished, you must first understand the soil in which it was planted, Port Blossom, Oregon. By the early 1980s, Port Blossom was a town gasping for air. The timber and fishing industries that had been its lifeblood for a century were in steep decline. Storefronts were boarded up. The salt-laced wind that blew in from the Pacific felt less like a promise and more like a eulogy. Then came Alistair Sterling. He didn't just bring jobs, he brought a narrative of rebirth. He purchased 1,000 acres of pristine, forgotten coastline, land deemed too rugged for development, and sold the world a vision. Here he declared, amidst the misty forests and basalt cliffs, humanity would make a stand. The Sterling Botanical Conservancy was not just a research facility, it was a promise of economic salvation for the town and ecological salvation for the world. And for a time, he delivered. The Conservancy's public wing was a marvel. 95% of the operation was, by all accounts, legitimate. Their labs developed a blight-resistant potato that was credited with staving off famine in 2 developing nations. Their tissue culture program famously saved the Franklinia tree from extinction. School buses lined up to tour the breathtaking geodesic domes. The gift shop sold honey from their apiaries and seeds for their award-winning roses. Alistair Sterling had given Port Blossom a new heart, and the town worshipped him for it. Dr. Alistair Sterling was a virtuoso of public perception. He cultivated the image of the benevolent patriarch, the man of science with the soul of a poet. In a 1994 interview, he said, "Voiceover shifts to an actor perfectly mimicking a charismatic, reassuring tone. Nature, you see, holds all the answers: sickness, hunger, despair. The cure for every human ill is written in the language of petals and roots. Our job, our privilege, is simply to learn how to read it." His office was a testament to this facade. It wasn't a corporate suite, it was a scholar's study. Lined with antique botany texts, the scent of old paper and lemon oil polish in the air. On his desk, next to photos of him shaking hands with presidents and philanthropists, sat a single, perfect orchid in a glass case. No one could know it was one of his daughter's first successful prototypes. A harmless version, of course. A proof of concept. A trophy from a secret war. If Alistair was the voice of the Conservancy, his daughter Eleanor was its silent, terrifying mind. She was rarely seen. Staff who encountered her in the hallways described a presence that seemed to lower the temperature of the room. She spoke only when necessary, her eyes constantly analyzing, dissecting. While her father collected accolades, Eleanor collected genomes. We have a single page recovered by investigators from what they believe was one of her private lab journals. It contains no personal feelings, no remorse, only a chilling intellectual clarity. Project 7B, whispering belladonna, pollen-vectored neuroagent, dispersal radius 3 meters, onset 90 seconds. Symptoms mimic hyperacute anaphylaxis, no known biomarkers, a perfect signal, no noise, elegant, a perfect signal, no noise. That was Eleanor's philosophy. To her, assassination wasn't murder, it was editing, tidying up the noise of inconvenient people. She saw her creations not as weapons, but as works of art, living sculptures designed for a single, perfect, fatal purpose. The Elysian Collection, that off-limits labyrinth of high-security greenhouses, was her private gallery. Its secrecy was maintained under the most plausible of corporate guises, protecting revolutionary, proprietary genetic research from corporate espionage. It was a lie so convincing the legitimate scientists at the Conservancy helped enforce it. and the gallery had a warden. Julian Thorne was the physical manifestation of the Sterling's paranoia. He was the enforcer of the silence. Thorne's official file was a black hole, but investigators pieced together a history in deniable foreign operations. He understood how to make people and problems disappear without a trace. He designed the Conservancy's security from the ground up, not just fences and cameras, but a system of psychological control. Every employee signed an ironclad non-disclosure agreement that carried ruinous financial penalties. Information was ruthlessly compartmentalized. The botanist studying fungal rusts in Lab 3 had no idea that the biochemist in Lab 4 was sequencing a cardiac poison. Thorne cultivated a quiet culture of professional discretion, where idle curiosity was seen as a career-ending flaw. He moved through the facility like a ghost, his presence a constant reminder that they were always being watched. Their operation didn't begin with a grand business plan. It began as an opportunity. In 1987, a year after opening, a powerful international financier, a friend of Alistair's from his old money circles, was facing a hostile takeover from a younger, more aggressive rival. During a private conversation at a fundraiser, the man lamented, "I'd give anything for him to just have a heart attack." Alistair didn't hear a complaint. He heard an opening bid. He returned to Port Blossom and tasked Eleanor not with a theory, but with a specific problem. A few months later, the rival, a man in perfect health, dropped dead of a massive coronary event while holidaying on his yacht. The only strange detail noted in his autopsy was the faint, pleasant smell of burnt grass from a sachet of herbal incense he'd received as an anonymous gift. An untraceable thank you of 7 figures arrived in one of Alistair Sterling's offshore accounts. The proof of concept was a success. The family business was born. The machine had been built, tested, and proven to be brutally effective. Now all they had to do was scale up production. And as the demand from the world's darkest corridors grew, so too did the ambition and the cruelty of the garden's keepers. A single successful kill is an assassination. A dozen is a pattern. But what the Sterlings built in their coastal Eden was something else entirely. It was an industry. Over the next 2 decades, the Elysian collection transformed from a bespoke workshop for murder into a silent biological assembly line. The initial success with the cardiac arrest-inducing grass, which they codenamed Pax Aeterna, or Eternal Peace, proved the business model. Alistair, the salesman, began subtly marketing their unique solutions through a network of trusted intermediaries, immoral corporate lawyers, shadowy security consultants, and back-channel diplomats. The clientele was elite, intelligence agencies seeking plausible deniability, corporations aiming to eliminate founders of disruptive startups, political dynasties needing to clear the path for an heir. But the clients were demanding. A heart attack wouldn't work for every target. They needed a portfolio of death. And so Eleanor's work escalated. Her challenge was no longer simply to kill, but to kill with tailored precision, to create symptoms that would fool any coroner anywhere in the world. From her refrigerated vault of source material, the world's most comprehensive and illicit collection of rare toxins, venom glands, and lethal botanical DNA, she began to innovate. For a famously asthmatic Eastern European journalist, she engineered an orchid, the phantom's breath, whose pollen contained a protein that triggered a catastrophic, irreversible asthma attack. It was delivered as a stunning bouquet to his hotel room. He died gasping for air, his own inhaler useless. The official cause of death was status asthmaticus. A tragic, but entirely believable, end. For a South African mining tycoon with a known penicillin allergy, Eleanor created a mold, the St. Anthony's Kiss, derived from a hyper-aggressive fungus. The spores, nearly invisible, were dusted onto the leather interior of his private jet. Within 48 hours, he developed what looked like a textbook case of septic shock from an unknown infection. By the time doctors administered broad-spectrum antibiotics, including penicillin, his own allergy finished the job. His death was ruled a catastrophic medical misadventure. The delivery systems became just as sophisticated. Seeds that could be planted in a target's garden months in advance, designed to flower and release their payload on a specific date. A topical agent derived from a poison dart frog resynthesized into a colorless, odorless cream that could be smeared on a doorknob, absorbing through the skin to induce violent, untraceable seizures. A slow-acting prion, cultured in a specific species of decorative mushroom that could be served in a risotto at a banquet, causing a slow, agonizing descent into dementia over the next 18 months. The price for such a long-term solution? An estimated $15 million. With each successful deployment, the Sterling's perverse rationalization became more entrenched. We know this from Eleanor's encrypted log files, where she justified her work not as murder, but as a form of ecological balancing. This godlike delusion required absolute secrecy. As the operation expanded, so did the risk. The Conservancy's legitimate staff now numbered over 150 people. More eyes, more ears, more potential for a loose thread to unravel everything. This is where Julian Thorne's role became ruthlessly vital. He designed and implemented the containment protocol. Any employee who showed undue curiosity about the Elysian collection, who had an unexplained IT flag on their computer for searching for sensitive keywords, or who was simply overheard asking the wrong question in the cafeteria, was marked. Thorne's methods were as subtle and varied as Eleanor's. An entomologist, Dr. Marcus Thorne, no relation, began noting anomalies in the insect populations near the Elysian greenhouses. He was offered a dream job at a sister research facility in Brazil. He flew out, was met at the airport, and was never seen again. His disappearance was blamed on the chaotic crime rates of Sao Paulo. A junior lab technician accidentally received a mislabeled crate meant for Eleanor. She saw precursor chemicals she knew had no place in legitimate botany. 2 weeks later, she suffered a fatal allergic reaction to a bee sting during a company picnic. Thorne had simply walked past her and brushed her arm with a handkerchief laced with one of Eleanor's creations. The internal death toll climbed to 17, each one a carefully managed accident, a plausible tragedy. A fire in a chemical storage closet, a single-car crash on a rain-slicked road, a sudden, unexplained aneurysm. The Sterling Conservancy cultivated an air of being tragically unlucky. In truth, it was lethally efficient. Just when everything seems to be coming to a head in this terrifying tale of Port Blossom, I want to pause for a moment. If this story is giving you chills, share this video with a friend who loves dark mysteries. Hit that like button to support our content. And don't forget to subscribe to never miss stories like this. The truth about what happened next is even more shocking than what we've uncovered so far. Let's discover together how this house of horrors finally came crashing down. For 25 years, the system was perfect. The money poured in, laundered through a dozen shell corporations disguised as philanthropic foundations. The bodies fell, their deaths serving as tragic footnotes in newspapers around the globe. The internal staff remained blissfully ignorant or terrified into silence. The father, daughter, and enforcer were untouchable, protected by a wall of money, secrecy, and beautiful deadly flowers. They believed their garden was perfectly sealed, their system infallible. They made one of the oldest mistakes in history. They underestimated the quiet, methodical dedication of a single, honest man who simply wanted to do his job. A man who noticed something that everyone else had missed. A tiny imperfection in their perfect, murderous world. Systems built on lies are inherently unstable. No matter how perfect the design, how ruthless the enforcement, they are vulnerable to a single, unpredictable variable, the integrity of one individual. For the Sterling family, that variable arrived in the spring of 2002. His name was Dr. Kenji Tanaka. Tanaka was not a hero looking for a conspiracy. He was a scientist, a mycologist, a specialist in fungi, and he was one of the best in his field. He had been hired by the Conservancy's legitimate wing for a specific public-facing project, to study and combat a new strain of fungal rust that was threatening Oregon's vital timber industry. It was a noble, high-profile project, perfectly in line with the Conservancy's public mission. Kenji Tanaka was brilliant, but more importantly, he was obsessively thorough. He believed that to understand a system, you needed to establish a perfect baseline. For weeks, he did just that. He collected hundreds of air, soil, and water samples from all over the Conservancy's 1,000-acre property, mapping the native microbiome of the Port Blossom coast. He was creating a detailed microscopic map of the entire ecosystem. And that is when he found the first anomaly. It was a stray spore, a single microscopic data point that didn't belong. He found it in an air filter sample taken from a ventilation duct on the exterior wall of the Elysian collection. According to his baseline data, this fungal spore had no business being in North America. In fact, its genetic markers were closest to a rare subterranean fungus found only in the deepest caves of the Philippines. It was a biological impossibility. For anyone else, it would have been a curiosity, a contaminated sample perhaps. But for Tanaka, it was a question that demanded an answer. His professional mind could not let it go. He began to dedicate his nights after his official work was done to this single microscopic mystery. He told no one. It was a personal intellectual puzzle. His first attempt to get a direct sample was politely but firmly rebuffed. Julian Thorne himself intercepted him near the entrance to the Elysian wing. Thorne's explanation was smooth and practical. "We appreciate your diligence, Doctor," he would have said, "but the research in the Elysian collection is under strict patent protection. Cross-contamination protocols are absolute." Thorne's eyes, however, would have communicated a different message. Stop looking. The warning had the opposite effect. Tanaka was now certain something was being hidden. The scientist had become an investigator. He knew a direct approach was impossible. He needed a way in. He found it in the one part of any system that is always messy: disposal. He learned that all biological waste from the Elysian collection was double-bagged in red hazmat containers and sent to a dedicated high-temperature incinerator at the far end of the property. The process was automated. But once a month, the incinerator underwent routine maintenance, and the sealed waste containers would sit for up to 12 hours in a refrigerated, locked holding area. One night, using a cloned keycard he'd fashioned from a temporary pass given to a visiting contractor, Tanaka slipped into the holding area. The air was cold, sterile, and silent. He found a row of sealed red bags. He knew he had only minutes. He carefully slit one open, reached inside with a pair of sterilized forceps, and pulled out his prize, a single discarded leaf from a sickly-looking black-leaf plant he didn't recognize. He sealed it in a sterile vial and vanished back into the night. He had his sample. He had the smoking gun. The problem was he didn't know what the gun fired. Back in his lab, he ran the leaf's DNA. The results that came back were the turning point, the confirmation of an evil he could never have imagined. The DNA was Frankenstein's monster. It contained markers from a species of hemlock, gene sequences from the venom of a funnel-web spider, and most disturbingly, synthetic artificial gene markers, segments of code that did not exist in nature, proteins that had no terrestrial origin. This wasn't a plant. It was a weapon, a biological machine designed to kill. The impossible spore, the secrecy, Thorne's warning, the artificial DNA, the pieces slammed together in his mind, the random accidents, the whispers of powerful people who had died suddenly after having dealings with Alistair Sterling. He realized with a surge of cold terror what the Sterling Botanical Conservancy truly was. He knew he was a dead man. He knew Thorne's surveillance was too sophisticated to have missed his breach entirely. He wasn't trying to escape anymore. He was trying to make sure the truth survived him. For 48 hours he didn't sleep. He compiled everything. His baseline data, the analysis of the spore, the full genetic sequence of the weaponized plant, and a detailed summary of his conclusions. He encrypted the entire package with a key so complex it would take a government supercomputer to crack it. On his final night, he transmitted the data package to a single email address, the public tip line of a small international bioterrorism watchdog organization, a digital message in a bottle cast out into the abyss. Moments later, he wiped his hard drives, smashed his computer, and walked out of the lab for the last time. He got into his car and drove south along the coastal highway. He never made it home. The official report was simple. Dr. Kenji Tanaka, likely exhausted from overwork, fell asleep at the wheel. Another tragic accident in the sad, unlucky history of the Sterling Conservancy. Alistair Sterling himself gave a moving eulogy at the memorial service. They thought they had erased the problems. They had erased the man, but they had failed to erase his data. For 9 long years, that encrypted file sat on a forgotten server in Geneva, Switzerland, flagged as a probable crank submission, until a young analyst tasked with clearing out old data decided on a whim to run it through a new decryption program. The dead had finally spoken, and the world was about to listen.
Radio voice.
All call signs, this is Sentinel Prime. We are green for Operation Nightshade. I repeat, green for Nightshade. Radio silence from this point. Execute. When Dr. Tanaka's message from the grave was finally decrypted in late 2010, it didn't just set off alarms. It triggered a tectonic shift within the highest levels of the U.S. government. The data was irrefutable. It was a step-by-step schematic for a weapon of mass destruction factory operating on American soil. For 9 months, a clandestine joint task force, codenamed Nightshade, planned their response in total secrecy. They knew they weren't just raiding a laboratory. They were dismantling a dynasty with deep connections to global power. On a cold, misty morning in March 2011, they struck. Alistair Sterling was apprehended in his private library. He offered no resistance, only utter disbelief. To the very end, he believed he was untouchable. Surrounded by agents, he reportedly looked one of them in the eye and said, with no hint of irony, "There must be some misunderstanding. I am Dr. Alistair Sterling. People like me." His delusion was so complete, he could not comprehend that his carefully constructed world was shattering around him. The raid on the Elysian collection was another matter entirely. The task force found what Dr. Tanaka had promised, a poisonous Eden. Greenhouses filled with flora of breathtaking beauty and lethality, orchids, lilies, mosses, grasses, a living arsenal. But the architect of this horror, Dr. Eleanor Sterling, was not there. They found her in her central control lab, a sterile white sanctum at the heart of the complex. There was no struggle. When the team breached the door, they found her sitting calmly in a chair, facing the door, as if she'd been expecting them. In her final moments, she had chosen to become her own last masterpiece. On the table next to her was a vial containing a hyper-concentrated neurotoxin derived from her phantom's breath orchid. An autopsy would later reveal it was the purest, most potent sample they would ever find. She had committed suicide with her own creation, leaving behind only her work to speak for her. There was no note, no confession, only an artist's final defiant signature. Julian Thorne, the enforcer, proved the most elusive. He was not on the grounds. His home was empty. He had vanished. In his security office, agents found the hard drives wiped, not just erased, but physically melted with thermite charges. It was a professional's exit. Thorne had understood the end was coming the moment the first helicopter appeared on the horizon. He slipped into the fog and became what he always was, a ghost. He is believed to be alive and remains one of the world's most wanted fugitives. The immediate aftermath was a firestorm of controlled information and wild speculation. The official story was sparse, a raid on a private facility suspected of developing unregulated biological agents. The word assassination was never used publicly. The names of the 200-plus potential victims on the client list were never released. That information was deemed a matter of global security, so explosive it could destabilize governments and upend international relations. But inside the Elysian collection, the full horror was being cataloged. Investigators, speaking on condition of anonymity, described a place of profound moral inversion. They found the client ledger, not a book, but an encrypted database. Each entry contained a target's name, a price, the biological agent selected, and a confirmation of delivery. They found the vault of genetic material, a library of extinction-level pathogens and toxins that made the CDC's own collection look like a high school science lab. But the most chilling discovery was in Eleanor's private notes. They revealed the next phase of her work. She was moving beyond targeted assassinations. She was developing plague-level agents, airborne rusts and waterborne bacteria designed to wipe out specific genetically linked populations. Her notes referred to it as macro gardening. It was no longer pruning branches, it was clearing the forest. The raid had not just stopped an assassination ring. It had averted a potential series of genocides. The only solution was fire. For 3 days, government teams incinerated the entire Elysian collection. Every leaf, every petal, every spore. They torched the labs, melted the equipment, and sterilized the very soil, turning Eleanor's poison garden into a field of black glass and ash. They were trying to erase the sin from the earth itself. But some stains, no matter how hot the fire, can never truly be burned away. In the end, there was no dramatic trial. There was no public reckoning. The evil of the Sterling Botanical Conservancy was deemed too vast, its implications too catastrophic for the open stage of the American justice system. The exposure was handled not with a bang, but with a suffocating, state-sanctioned silence. Dr. Eleanor Sterling had escaped justice through her own needle. Julian Thorne had vanished into the shadows he so expertly commanded. That left only the patriarch, Dr. Alistair Sterling, the charming face of the entire monstrous enterprise. He was tried in a closed federal court under sealed indictments. The charges were a carefully selected list: conspiracy to produce unregistered biological agents, money laundering, and tax evasion. The words murder and assassination were never entered into the official record. His client list, that terrifying ledger of global corruption, was classified at a level higher than top secret and buried. To the world, Alistair Sterling was not a mass murderer for hire. He was a white-collar criminal who broke FDA regulations. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences in a federal supermax prison. Stripped of his bespoke suits and charming facade, he was just another old man in a prison jumpsuit. He died 7 years into his sentence from what prison officials called natural causes, a sudden aggressive fungal infection in his lungs that baffled his doctors. A final, cruel piece of poetry. The seeds from his own garden, it seems, had finally come home to roost. The impact on Port Blossom was devastating. The town that had been saved by the Conservancy was now tainted by it. Their identity was inextricably linked to a house of horrors. The jobs vanished overnight, the property was seized by the federal government, and a quarantine zone a mile wide was established around the incinerated remains of the Elysian collection. For years, residents whispered of strange illnesses, of a lingering sickness in the air. The CDC insisted the area was clean, but the fear was a contagion that could not be sterilized. Port Blossom became a ghost town for the second time. Its first savior revealed to be its greatest monster. Number 1, we were saving the Franklinia tree. We were curing blight. We were doing good work. How could we not know? We worked beside them every day. How could we not see the evil right there in the next room? My daughter, she loved the public gardens. She had her 5th birthday party there. Now I can't even look at the pictures. They took a place of beauty and made it ugly forever. The legacy of the Sterlings is not found in a grand monument, but in its opposite, in the silence, in the empty spaces. It's in the hundreds of death certificates around the world that will forever read natural causes. It's in the 17 families of the silent staff who never got true answers, whose loved ones were written off as victims of tragic, random accidents. The only physical memorial is an unofficial one. On a cliff overlooking the quarantined land, a small makeshift collection of 17 simple white crosses has been erected. They were put there by an anonymous group, likely the families of the murdered staff. There are no names on the crosses, only numbers, 1 through 17. A silent testament to the victims of the containment protocol. A quiet scream against the official narrative. Did any good come from this horror? In the shadows of the intelligence world, yes. The discovery of Eleanor's biological art triggered a revolution in forensic toxicology. Agencies worldwide developed new screening methods specifically designed to detect the kinds of synthetic proteins and artificial gene markers she had pioneered. She had, in her evil, inadvertently created the very tools that would be used to hunt for killers like her in the future. A new set of laws, known colloquially as the Tanaka Act, was passed, giving watchdog agencies greater oversight of private genetic research. But the story remains largely hidden, a chapter of American history deliberately left unwritten. The Sterling name is now synonymous with a deep institutional betrayal. They prove that the most terrifying monsters don't lurk in the dark. They host galas, win awards, and smile from the covers of magazines, all while tending to their secret gardens of death. What do you think of this story? Do you believe that in our modern age of private biotech and corporate secrecy, something like the Sterling Conservancy could exist again? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this investigation compelling and want to hear more stories about America's hidden criminal history, subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and share this video with someone who appreciates the importance of uncovering buried truths. Until next time, remember that the most important stories are often the ones that powerful people hoped would never be told. You have to understand, we didn't just shut down a factory. We kicked over a hornet's nest the size of a city. We burned the nest, sure, but the hornets got out, and they're still out there. The story never really ended. It just went back into the shadows where it started. There are two ghosts that haunt the legacy of the Sterling Conservancy, two elements that were not incinerated in the fire or buried in a supermax prison. The first is a man. The second is a list. Both are still active threats. Julian Thorne, the enforcer, the silent partner who managed the company's bloody human resources, was never captured. For the first 5 years after the raid, a dedicated FBI-CIA task force hunted him relentlessly. They followed whispers and phantom sightings from the yacht clubs of Monaco to the back alleys of Manila. What they found was not the man himself, but the wake he left behind. In 2013, a Russian oligarch who defected to the UK, a man surrounded by the best private security in the world, died suddenly from a rare spider bite. There are no venomous spiders of that type native to England. The spider was found on a bouquet of flowers delivered to his penthouse. In 2016, a key witness in a major international money laundering case suffered a violent seizure and died moments before he was to give his testimony in a secure safe house. The only anomaly was a new air freshener that had been plugged into an outlet by a cleaning crew member who was never identified. The intelligence community does not believe Thorne is hiding. They believe he is working. He is a freelancer now, the world's only boutique assassin who can guarantee a death that looks like an act of God. He is the last living practitioner of Eleanor Sterling's art, and his services, they speculate, now command a price in the tens of millions. He is not a fugitive. He is a specter, a walking testament to the fact that the Sterling's methods did not die with them. The second ghost is the client list. Known within intelligence circles as the Damocles Ledger, it remains perhaps the single most dangerous piece of information ever recovered on American soil. While its contents are a state secret, its existence is a weapon in itself. Think of the power it holds. The names of politicians, CEOs, and dynastic heirs from every major country on earth who at some point paid millions to have a problem biologically and silently erased. The United States government will never prosecute these individuals. The diplomatic and economic fallout would be apocalyptic. But knowledge is power. Imagine a tense trade negotiation and a quiet back-channel mention to a foreign diplomat that his prime minister's name is on a certain list next to the name of a political rival who died in a convenient hiking accident a decade ago. Imagine the leverage. The poisons Eleanor Sterling designed are no longer botanical. They are informational. The ledger is her true legacy, a tool for blackmail and control on a global scale, ensuring the tendrils of the Sterling Conservancy will be shaping world events for a century to come. But of all the lingering horrors, one is perhaps the most personal and the most profoundly disturbing. It was found years after the raid, during the final cataloging of Alistair Sterling's personal effects from his office. Tucked away in a hidden compartment in his antique desk, investigators found a photo album. It did not contain pictures of his family or his famous acquaintances. It contained 17 photographs. Each was a candid shot of one of the murdered staff members. Dr. Marcus Thorne, the entomologist, laughing at a company barbecue. The young lab tech who saw the wrong crate smiling on her first day of work. Dr. Kenji Tanaka, squinting in the sun, accepting an award at a small ceremony. On the back of each photograph, in Alistair's elegant handwriting, was a single date. Investigators cross-referenced them. They were the dates Julian Thorne was given the order to retire them. It was his trophy case, a memento of his ultimate betrayals. It proved that this was never just a business for Alistair Sterling. He wasn't just pruning a garden. He was savoring the destruction of every life, keeping a souvenir of the trust he had cultivated and then extinguished. It is the final, chilling proof that the most monstrous poison of all was not in the plants but in the man who walked among them, smiling.